Having been around drugs 70 years ago, people might have experienced communist disgrace if they were the drug users. McCarthyism and fanatical anti-communism took hold in the US in 1950 during the Cold War era. In a dichotomous way, McCarthyism divided the world into the US and the Soviet Union as well as the red and the not-US. The claim has been made in this instance that the communist nation centered on the Soviet Union distributed the drug in order to undermine the liberal democracy centered in the US. After all, the reasoning went drug users were no different from communists. Surprisingly, it was the US and the CIA who ignored and oversaw the drug trafficking carried out by the global criminal organization, cloaking itself in the banner of anti-communism. The US participated in the drug trade of a number of nations, including Cuba, the Philippines, and Nicaragua. Additionally, the rationale behind the US-made lead drugs during the Cold War affected other nations. The issue is that countries are still unable to eradicate drug use due to the drug problem brought on by the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. We can now learn more about the Cold War drug trade and anti-communism. The US and the Soviet Union were the two dominant nations left in the world following World War II. To avoid falling behind and to gain the upper hand in the competition, they mobilized all of the nation's resources. They disregarded the opposing viewpoint to their own ideology because there were only two options, the US or the Soviet Union. A typical illustration of this madness is McCarthyism. The argument that the drug user is the rat has been made in the context of McCarthyism. The United States asserts that communist nations like the Soviet Union and China distributed drugs to weaken liberal democracies, particularly the US. The US argued that because communist nations are the center of drug trafficking, it is necessary to exert control over them. So in order to keep an eye on communist nations, the US made the 1953 Opium Protocol Agreement. The US claim wasn't met with a response from the Soviet Union. The Opium Protocol was an agreement to send international observers to nations that disobeyed it in order to investigate this matter. This treaty was opposed by the Soviet Union because it would have allowed the US to meddle in the internal affairs of communist nations. The US, however, continued to support the treaty despite the Soviet Union's opposition. Korea revised the 1953 Opium Protocol as well. At the time, the Korean War had left its scars and the nation of Korea was gripped by a fear of communism. By promoting anti-communism, President Lee Seung-man hoped to increase his position of authority. In this instance, Lee Jung-up, a member of the South Korean Workers' Party, provided North Korea with information about South Korea. Thus, according to Lee Seung-man, Lee Jung-up distributed opium from North Korea to South Korea. He further claimed that North Korea gave the drug to South Korea in order to weaken the military and taint the nation's moral and social safety. Then it was believed that spies and the rat had sent drugs to South Korea. Many people unjustly endured the shame of the lead and either died or were sent to prison. Politicians who opposed Lee Seung-man were particularly vulnerable. Jo Bong-am, Lee Seung-man's rival, was given the death penalty for breaking the national security law. Opium was one of the causes of death. Ha Bong-i of the Progressive Party, which includes Jo Bong-am, brought a cigar with opium in it. This was the reason he was a spy, because it indicated contact with North Korea. After that, the rumors that China and North Korea had smuggled drugs into South Korea in an effort to overthrow South Korea quickly spread. It is not accurate to say that the communist world distributed drugs to destroy the capitalist world. Contrary to popular belief, the CIA was in charge of drug distribution, not the communist world. Instead of promoting anti-communism, the CIA actively backed guerrilla movements fighting against it in the Third World. The CIA participated in and oversaw their drug trafficking during this process. Southeast Asia is a good illustration of it. In order to promote anti-communism, the CIA planned for Daili to establish a drug trafficking network in Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle. The leader of Jiang's military intelligence organization, the Bureau of Investigation and Statistics, was Daili, also known as China's Hitler. After losing the Chinese Civil War to Mao Zedong at the time, Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan. Because of his anti-guerrilla campaign to retake the Chinese mainland, the CIA ignored his drug trafficking. It's because the organization assisting the CIA's covert operation benefited financially from drug trafficking. Drug trafficking was a lucrative business for international criminal organizations, and the CIA supported it. As a result, 70% of the world's illicit drug production was concentrated in Southeast Asia. Which helped the US heroin market flourish in 1916. The more shocking fact is that the CIA has passed over drug trafficking until recently. Nicaragua has been occupied by the pro-socialist Sandinista National Liberation Front. To prevent communism, the US backed the Contra, which was fighting the Sandinista. Between 1987 and 1989, the CIA conspired with the infamous drug dealer Alan Hyde to arm the Contra, an ally of the United States in Nicaragua. From 1987 to 1993, the CIA kept drug squads out of the area to protect Hyde. Ironically, Reagan vigorously restricted drug use in the US while actively aiding the CIA's Contra campaign. In fact, the number of inmates in US prisons increased significantly during this period, rising from 370,000 in 1981 to 710,000 in 1989 as the drug war intensified. In the 1980s, the US also collaborated with Afghanistan opium trafficking businessmen and ICI agents in each war in Afghanistan, which it ways to expel Soviet troops from the country. From the 1970s to 1991, opium production increased from 100 to 2,000 tons annually, and heroin factories swarmed the Afghan-Pakistan border. The CIA knew all the facts but acquiesced. The Afghan-Pakistan border has become a center for heroin trafficking as a result of US intervening in Afghanistan. Drug trafficking was impacted by the ideology of the Cold War that divided the world. Arguments about the United States and the Soviet Union being the source of drug persisted during the Cold War. The issue is that drug abuse is still a problem in nations that became drug exporters as a result of the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union. Numerous people are affected by drugs in South America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Who ought to be in charge of this? So thank you for watching this video, and please don't forget to click the subscribe and the like button.